Donald Trump has been trying to hide his tax returns ever since he ran for office in 2016, hiding how rich he is and his conflicts of interest. But today, the Supreme Court just dealt him a major blow.
So the president must turn over his taxes to the grand jury in New York unless he can come up with the same kind of arguments that any other person would be able to raise as an objection in court. So the Supreme Court sent the Vance case, the New York grand jury case, back to the lower courts, but it took away all the arguments the president made about why he is different and special, that he's absolutely immune from the criminal justice process, and that allowing local district attorneys to seek things from the president would subject the president to harassment. So what the Supreme Court says is, okay, now go back to court and make the same kind of arguments anybody else would make about why you think these subpoenas are intrusive. It puts him on the same standard, basically, in other words, as anybody else trying to block a subpoena, makes it much, much, much harder for the president to keep this material out of the hands of the grand jury in New York.
So I'm quite confident if the judge is impartial and isn't a Trump or Republican lackey, that he won't be able to make the case that his financial records are unnecessary and arbitrary and capricious or whatever in doing a financial investigation into him. So I do believe that the Manhattan DA will be able to get access to Trump's tax returns, and eventually they'll be released to the public, but they will be confidential when the grand jury has access to them. The bad news, though, the second ruling, the congressional subpoena, is quite broad, and that's what the Supreme Court ruled on there. They basically said that it needs to be looked over again. So what all of this means is that both cases are going to be sent back to court. Sides have to form new legal arguments, and Trump's tax returns are not going to be available, most likely, before the election in November. So the Trump campaign, people in the Trump team are kind of celebrating. Trump is, going after the Supreme Court witch hunt on Twitter this morning. But we will likely see them due to Cy Vance, the Manhattan DA's office, looking in to his financial records, because I just don't think there can be any argument made that as a normal human being in this case, that Trump's tax returns should not be released or should not be given to the prosecution, handed over to the grand jury. More details here. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the 7-2 opinion that the president is not categorically immune from grand jury requests. Both Supreme Court justices nominated by Trump, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, sided with the majority. In terms of the substance of the two Supreme Court decisions, the opinions mark a defeat for Trump because the justices rejected his legal team's argument that the president should be immune from such proceedings. However, the president appears to have secured a victory in terms of the logistics of the decisions. The justices ruled that Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance may receive the president's tax returns and financial records. However, even if Vance can get the records soon, they will likely not be made public because they will be turned over to a grand jury, legally requiring them to be kept secret. In terms of the House subpoenas, the Supreme Court sent the case back down to the lower court to more closely consider separation of powers issues. That will almost certainly delay the release of Trump's financial records to the committees until after the election. Bottom line, we will likely see Trump's tax returns eventually. Most likely not before the election. Doesn't matter that much because Trump is tanking so thoroughly in the polls and the election is turning into a referendum on Trump. He could be running against a potato, and he basically is, and the potato would likely be Trump at this point. Sorry, Joe Biden. A potato who also said he'd veto Medicare for all, doesn't believe in legalizing marijuana, wrote the crime bill that incarcerated millions of black and brown people. Anyway, so I think Biden could theoretically say, I'm not going to debate Trump until he releases his tax returns. Biden shouldn't get on the debate stage with Trump if he can get away with it, because Trump will likely go after him aggressively in the debates, and I think Trump's a pretty good debater, and Biden is, not all there in some ways. We saw how he performed in the Democratic debates. I don't think it was very good, so we'll see. But this is overall good news, because eventually, hopefully we will see Trump's tax returns and see all of the conflicts of interest, all of the bizarre hush money payments, weird finaglings, likely criminal actions, and of course, lying about how rich he is.